Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Life in Comedy. I'm your host, Will Beckton. This is a show about comedy and the people who harness their obsession with it. My guest today is Mark Malkoff, who wrote the highly entertaining and informative biography, Love, Johnny Carson, one obsessive fan's journey to find the genius behind the legend. Mark also hosted the Carson Podcast, which ran for almost 400 episodes, and is the current host of Inside Late Night for LateNighter.com. He's a really smart and pleasant guy, and I enjoyed talking to him. I am here with Mark Malkoff, writer, podcast host, and comedy world veteran. I'm really excited to talk to you. He has a book out, Love, Johnny Carson, and is a longtime Johnny Carson fan. And we'll talk about that a little deeper into the show. But I was curious, you grew up in Hershey, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I moved there when I was fourth grade, I think, central Pennsylvania. Hershey High School and Hershey Park. It smells like chocolate when it's windy or raining. It was a very strange place to grow up.
I actually read an interesting interview with Diane Lane, and she said in The Outsiders, for a dusty scene, they used cocoa powder so it wouldn't sting the actor's eyes. But she said after the shoot, they would lick the cocoa powder.
I never thought of that. Interesting. Yeah, it was like a cardinal sin to eat anything other than Hershey products. Like, I don't remember ever eating M&Ms when I'm living there. I'm not joking.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and that was like a Coke, Pepsi.
Yeah.
Nobody was going to order Pepsi.
No. Yeah, gotta make the locals happy.
Yeah. So you went to NYU?
I did. You know, when I was in Hershey, my mom would write these handwritten notes to get me out of school. Mark is going on an educational trip to New York City. Please excuse him. And she legit would write these, and I'd be going to see Late Night with David Letterman or Conan his first year where they couldn't fill the studio audience.
Wow.
So, yeah, I just fell in love with that world. Like, that building to me still to this day on the island of Manhattan is my favorite place in the city. And I've talked to people that currently work there, that have worked there forever, and there is just something about the energy of that place.
Yeah.
And getting to go to the 6th floor to 6A and see Letterman, then it became Conan, and then I just remember just taking it all in and just, when I turn 18, I'm going to try to get to New York.
Oh, wow. So that even preceded, like, NYU isn't what brought you.
I was camping out for Saturday Night Live tickets back when New York was still very scary.
Oh, my God.
I got to go to the show a bunch of times. I was just obsessed with SNL, and I was pen pals. I still have letters from the cast. I've answered machine messages, talked to them on the phone here and there, and it just opened up this whole world that was, believe it or not, more exciting than Hershey, Pennsylvania. So...
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to do two things. I'm going to turn one thing down, and I'm going to turn the AC up.
Oh, man. I did Mark Schiff and Danny LaBelle's podcast. Mark Schiff is a comic who opens up for Seinfeld, went on Carson a bunch of times, and they have this van where they record, and the AC went out, and like literally it's dripping sweat, but this feels good.
It's funny because, you know how like creatures of late night are creatures of habit a lot of times, you know, which makes sense.
That's true. Dave Letterman especially.
But like at Conan, we kept the studio at a frigid temperature.
They all want that. I had a day job at the Colbert Report, and Stephen Colbert wanted it cold. Letterman, I had a day job there. Of course, he was the king of wanting the studio cold.
Yeah.
First of all, the lights are really hot, but it's the theory that the audience will be more alert and they'll laugh more.
I think that's it, because the lights are all LED now. It's not like Klieg lights anymore. So I think it has to do more with that. And also just the superstition of people with the science of what makes a good crowd and all that.
Yeah, I will say Conan, that first year, the first at least 6 months, it did not matter if it was cold, if it was warm, people were not going to laugh. I mean, I couldn't believe it.
Make or break.
I'd be laughing, but like people did not understand the show. They certainly couldn't fill 199 seats.
Oh, my God.
Conan would come out to sing Hunka Hunka Burnin' Love, Elvis Presley for his warm-up.
Oh, wow.
Joel Goddard would do the warm-up, and they specifically had Joel Goddard, Conan's announcer, because a Conan writer explained this to me. They were afraid that any stand-up comedian that did a warm-up would get way more laughs than Conan, who was untested.
Yeah. So you don't want Louis C.K. doing the warm-up.
After Joel, they got rid of him, and they started having stand-ups. And Louis, I saw do it once because I went to the show all the time. And it was so hard for him to not get laughs. And it was like, I was like, with friends, I'm like, this guy, I've seen him do stand-up.
Trust me, this guy knows how to do stand-up,
So it just took a while, but I loved the writing. I really liked with they were doing. And that's how I got to meet Robert Smigel. I was 17 years old.
Yeah. Were you a page at that point?
No.
Or you were just checking out
I was in Hershey,
tapings?
Pennsylvania. I would be just driving and then going to the show. And then sometimes on the weekends, I'd hang out in the 30 Rock lobby when the cast of SNL would be coming in for rehearsal between like 11 and 1 and meet them. And I couldn't believe that I could have conversations with them and some of the writers. They'd be like, how do you know who I am? And do that in high school. And then Smigel, this was December of 93. Sally Field was hosting SNL, and that's when I first met Smigel. And I couldn't believe I knew who he was and that I liked Conan because it had been on for about 3 months at that point. So Smigel's like, here's my phone number. Whenever you want tickets or whatever, just let me know. So yeah, I would just call him. I remember I'm like, okay, I'll leave a message on his voicemail or whatever. And I'd call it like 10 or 11 and he'd still be there. And he's like, we're doing a Clutch Cargo tonight. Stay up and watch the show. And then I'd go to the show, and then he would ask me my opinions. Because first time I met him, he was just like, first of all, I can't believe you recognize me. You know who I am. I told him I really like Right Side, Wrong Side, which is a bit they did. And he's like, that's Bob Odenkirk, who I'm sure you know who that is. And I'm like, yes, I do. Conan said this, and this is absolutely true. It was that summer, it was the summer of 94 that the college kids really started going the show. And I saw the tide starting to turn a little bit over there.
They were on major thin ice, like basically all the time.
It was, it was every, 12 or 13 weeks. Greg Kinnear didn't want the gig. Rosie O'Donnell, Carvey didn't want the gig. Shandling didn't want the gig. It really was that situation. And I know we're going to talk about Johnny Carson a little bit, where Carson had this thing as well, where nobody wanted to replace Jack Parr because he was the hottest thing in TV.
Yeah.
And Conan even said he remembers hearing when Letterman was leaving. He said Conan remembers thinking whoever takes this job is in so much trouble because having to follow Dave Letterman.
Yeah. It's like going on after The Who or something, you know, like, good luck.
So Carson became the king of late night. Still to this day, they do these polls. Johnny's been off the air for 30 plus years and he's still always voted #1. But it was one of those things for a solid year, maybe even more. People were like, he's so boring compared to Jack Parr. He's dull. And it takes a while for something new to resonate with the public. It doesn't matter what it is or who it is. It takes a while.
Yeah. For something that intimate, like that medium is that genre of show is like, you have to like gain trust, basically.
I didn't understand because I would see Conan sometimes in the lobby or he'd come out while we were camping out for tickets and he would look like he had lost the Super Bowl every time. And I didn't realize, because I'm like, you're getting paid so much money. You're on television on late night and all this. I knew he was getting beat up in the press, but I didn't understand the concept of, back then at least, like depression. And how everywhere he went, he was just getting beat up left and right and all this pressure.
Yeah, and also shielding your staff from that pressure. You have to kind of like put on a good face and act like things are fine to a certain degree.
It was rough. But yeah, it was really fun to see the tide change. I think it's one of the greatest success stories showbiz breaks ever. Yeah. Really, for this guy, this complete unknown, to get this gig and for him to take the beating, which he did. Yeah. And that Tom Shales, he always will bring up, or he used to bring that Tom Shales review. Yeah. I mean, Shales ripped the show and him apart and then writes this other one, just this glowing. I mean, Conan, they figured that show out. It took a little time, but they figured it out. I think the writing was good right away. Yeah. I think him and Andy needed some time on camera to really figure out.
And interviewing, that takes a little bit of time to get your footing, I think.
Like Dave Letterman was guest hosting for Johnny Carson, and then he had the morning show. And even with that, he still, when he debuted the 12:30 show on NBC on February 1st, 82, it still took him like a year or so to get the interviews. They're not easy to do.
No. It's like 7 minutes. You got to work in like a plug for their show and you got to like keep the train running on time.
There are a lot of boring people that come on too to make them interesting and listening and keeping the thing funny. And I really do wish that Eartha Kitt interview, I don't think it's available online, but he said that was the worst thing he ever, in terms of a guest that just didn't understand what was the show. Yeah. But whenever it would go off the rails, like, who's that director that tried to leave? Was it Abel Ferrara? Am I getting
That's what I was just thinking about.
Oh, my goodness. That's wonderful. That's
I think
online.
Frank Smiley had to, like, chase him down to the 30 Rock lobby or something. Yeah. And I think maybe he went to the lobby bar.
Hurley's downstairs was still Hurley's. Now it's Magnolia, and that's where people would go to have a drink. Yeah. Once in a while, they would get something where it would just go off the rails. Like, I was watching the night Norm Macdonald was with Courtney Thorne Smith.
We interviewed her about that on Inside Conan.
I can't even imagine being in that audience in 6A when that was happening.
So she had done a Carrot Top movie?
Chairman of the board.
Chairman of the board. And one of Norm's kind of interjections, and he wasn't even supposed to be part of the interview.
No.
He's just kind of interjecting. But I think it was, I got a good title for it. Box Office Poison or whatever.
That's right. But that was the first Box Office Poison.
And then he did the great wordplay to kind of like top that or whatever.
Conan challenged him. He's He was like, what's the name of your movie with Carrot Top? And then Courtney Thorne, chairman of the board. And Conan's like, yeah, see what you can do with that, you weirdo.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, board spelled B-O-R-E-D.
And Conan's convulsing. He does a Johnny Carson thing, which he almost looks like he's going to fall off his chair, which Carson would do sometimes when you would get somebody that was that smart and that fast. Yeah, that was incredible television.
People hold him in such high regard.
He's in the book because we texted back and forth about Johnny Carson for a while. And even though Dave Letterman was his guy, one of his dreams was to do Carson. And Jim McCauley, who was the gatekeeper, it devastated Norm when McCauley said, you're not right for Carson. Wouldn't even put him on with Leno as guest host. And Leno and Jimmy Brogan were the ones that overrode McCauley and put Norm on it with Jay, and Norm crushed.
Yeah.
I really do miss that guy. I didn't know him well, but I was close text-wise going back and forth, convincing him to do a doc about originally I wanted to do on his update, and he was like, Mark, I don't want to be known for update. I think that was hard for him. He's like, I want to be known about my stand-up, my whole career.
Because of the way update ended, or because of just being overly associated with update?
I think he just always, from the time he started in comedy, was like, I'm a stand-up, the same way as Leno hosted The Tonight Show, but he's still like, I'm a stand-up first and foremost. Yeah. And I think that Norm had this thing where he thinks maybe update overshadowed the work that he cared about more. That makes sense.
If you really cared about stand-up and people thought of that as your second thing all of a sudden, I can see how that would get to you.
So then I pitched it as a stand-up doc, and we went back and forth, and then I didn't know he was sick. Not many people did.
Like a lot of people close to him didn't know.
Yeah, I was just love watching Norm.
One thing I was curious about, because you started the Carson podcast in 2014.
We started releasing in 2014 in February. I started doing the recordings in 2013. And I have to tell you, I did not think it was going to go anywhere. I thought I might talk to maybe 7 people if I was lucky. And I did not realize that I picked the right thing where everybody would want to talk to me. It was like, people would be, how did you get this famous person? I'm like, I picked Carson, and
they just like talking about Carson.
Yeah, they kept thanking me over and over again.
That's so cool.
Lots of iconic, legendary people. And it was back when you couldn't really do podcast remote. So I did a lot of them in Los Angeles and New York. And I'd say, I'm happy to come to you, or we could do it somewhere nearby. But a lot of times they'd just have me in their homes or their offices. So it was definitely...
There's an intimacy to that.
Yeah. I really am just so blessed that I had that. And we ended up doing... in 8 years, almost 400 episodes.
Wow.
Yeah, for the book, I talked with that and with everything over 400 people. So,
wow. Yeah, some of the names that jumped out at me: Dick Cavett, Mort Saul, Stephen Wright, Brooke Shields, Mel Brooks.
Yeah, Mel's especially notoriously difficult to get him. First thing he said, he's like, I don't do many of these. It's only because his best friend Carl Reiner told him it was a good time because I had just been with
Carl Reiner first.
Yeah, I got to go to his home in Beverly Hills twice, and I interviewed him. It was 32 or 33 days before he passed away, and he was so nice to tell Mel to do it. And,
wow.
Yeah.
Strictly as an interviewer, I would say Dick Cavett is probably my favorite late night personality.
Cavett is unbelievable. I'm so glad that his shows live on. I got together with him a bunch of times, but one of the times I showed him a kinescope of him on Carson in 64 or 65, and his jaw just dropped.
Was this like a museum of the moving picture type kind of
deal? No, this was just
like...
something I had access to, and I showed him that. I showed him guest hosting for Johnny, and he had other plans, and he calls his assistant and canceled them and just was hanging out. Yeah, I was like a little kid, just so excited.
That is so cool.
To see this old footage and just to talk.
So is a kinescope filmed off of a TV monitor? But that's pretty interesting technology.
Unbelievable.
The episode I really like, I guess it was the last episode of the Carson podcast. You interviewed Robert Smigel and Dana Carvey. And I think it totally proves your point of people being so excited to talk about Carson because, you knew Smigel, but still, not only did Smigel say yes, but he was like, and Dana Carvey's going to join it too.
Robert really talked him into it. Carvey does not like to do very much unless it's necessary. He's plugging a special or it's somebody he knows. But Robert told me he had a really good time. And I think you can tell.
Yeah.
I really wanted both of them on. There were a couple people that weren't thrilled that they were on as the last guest just because indirectly were responsible for Johnny retiring some little bit just with those sketches. Dana was playing Johnny Carson and Robert wrote the sketches, and Robert told me it was one of his big regrets that they upset Carson.
That's tough.
Norm Macdonald, as I put in the book, was like, I'm sure they thought Carson was just so big and important that he wouldn't even
be
care.
Bulletproof in some way.
It's just what it was. I mean, I think it was like less than a week after Carcinio that Johnny announced his retirement, which was a big surprise at Carnegie Hall at the upfronts. But, he just didn't want to be perceived as somebody that was out of touch.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how they wrote him. And there were other factors as well. NBC had moved the show from 11:30 to 11:35 without telling him. And even though it's 5 minutes, people get into habits and it's going to affect the ratings. And it was just a lot of things like that. He probably would have left anyway. Those sketches, he was not thrilled about.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Dana Carvey is Rich Little, probably the other most famous Carson image. But Carvey's was so good.
He loved Carson, too.
Yeah,
they both did.
I think it was coming from a good place, but I think that, in my mind, and also just going off of what Dana Carvey was saying, it was kind of like, at first, it was just basically mannerism kind of based. And then they started to dig a little bit deeper into the question of still being like an important part of the social landscape. And looking back on it, it's so weird because Arsenio's show was a fine show, but to think of Johnny Carson being like threatened by the Arsenio Hall show, like it just in the overall history of television is so interesting,
Yeah, I mean, Arsenio was at the time for a couple of years was the hottest thing in TV.
Yeah.
He never overtook Carson in ratings. It was a different audience, but the thing that upset Carson the most was actually one of the sketches that they did. It was, I think it was October of 1990 when Patrick Swayze hosted. And
was this the Chippendales episode?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And Lorne Michaels came up with an idea that Smigel incorporated into a sketch, which is Jan Hooks is Susan Day. I think originally it was going to be Sinead O'Connor, but it's Susan Day. And instead of Carson asking her about LA Law, her current huge show, he's just talking about the Partridge Family.
Oh.
And he's so not up to date and not current. Yeah. And then you have Chris Rock playing Arsenio Hall. It says on this card that your show gets better ratings than us. And so Johnny wasn't thrilled.
So I really like your other podcast. When did Inside Late Night start?
Like a year and a couple months, something like that.
I listened to the Liz Winstead episode.
Oh, yeah.
Which I really love. And I'm good friends with Madeline Smithberg.
Oh, Madeline's wonderful. She's been here, right?
Yeah. In terms of shows where the people involved in the show have since gone on throughout the world of comedy and just show business in general, the two that come to mind most prominently are probably Late Night with Conan O'Brien and The Daily Show. As far as just like the amount of talented people on those staffs.
Longevity. Yeah, it's unbelievable who's come out of those places. Liz was fun. I love those early days. And to her credit, to both Liz and Madeline, because I talked to Madeline about this.
They're co-creators of The Daily Show.
And they both admitted that they were completely against Doug Herzog, the head of Comedy Central's idea to have a live audience. And Doug is like, let's just try it one time with test audience. And they both said within 30 seconds, they realized Herzog was right.
Yeah.
And just the whole evolution of that was fun. I remember when it came out and Kilborn, he just was like, apparently reading the sports section in his office and not putting any effort into the show.
Yeah.
And, it's a comedy writer's dream because he would just read whatever was on the prompter. Some comics are like, no, I'm not saying this or go rewrite. He just like, give me it. I'll read it.
Yeah. The twists and turns of that show.
Yeah. The tone changed a lot.
One thing I was curious about, I really loved the communal aspect of working on a late night show. It's kind of its own thing. There's something about the bond and also just the organism of a late night show that I think is really unique.
I agree. There's something wonderful about you're going in the morning. There's a meeting about this is what we're going to do tonight. It's not like if you're doing a movie,
doesn't exist yet.
If you're doing a movie, it's all and out of sequence for the most part, and it would take hours just to light some things and locations. Whereas like there's a goal, we're going to get this done tonight.
Yeah.
The Colbert Report, which I was there for 3 years and 8 months, was the best experience I ever had. And originally we were supposed to do 40 episodes with the caveat that if the network liked it, they would extend it and make it an actual real show. I knew Colbert's work. I'd met him when I was 19 at the Dana Carvey show.
He was on the writing staff, right? That legendary writing staff.
Yeah, he was writing and he was on camera. I just knew Jon Stewart was producing. And I was like, I'm in. But it was great to see the evolution of that show, but I still feel very bonded to a lot of those people, yeah.
One of the things that we did, when I was at Conan, obviously there's Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, but I also really loved engineering the Inside Conan podcast. One of my favorite interviews was Bill Carter, who now you work with. So Bill Carter, just for people that don't know, he's a journalist, writer, wrote The War for Late Night. And I'm sure there's other...
The Late Shift.
Yeah, The Late
Shift.
Yeah,
Letterman and Leno and New York Times late night writer. And interviewed Lorne Michaels maybe the year as Saturday Night Live started in 75. He goes way back with SNL too, yeah.
Yeah, but just an amazing writer and also somebody that is highly regarded in the Conan world.
Oh,
in particular, yeah.
That's great. Bill, he was there, during some of those really tough times. Some of the stuff Bill has said is almost Shakespearean, and some of the Letterman, Leno stuff, and then the stuff that went down with Conan, with The Tonight Show. And yeah, Bill was the one that really got those stories and got people to open up.
Yeah.
And he is regarded by all the late night hosts that I know of as just being the authority on that time period for sure.
Yeah, because there'd be things like when you're just sort of floating around the Conan offices, you'll hear certain things like Tom Shales, the Tom Shales article, or whatever, like these sort of seminal moments, but he can contextualize those and really make those kind of come alive and communicate the stakes of it.
Definitely.
Late night, it's almost like a Rasputin type thing or whatever. I feel like late night is continually sort of on life support
these days,
but also considered super important, especially right now. It occupies a very weird space as far as being kind of like the front lines of the culture war in a certain way, but also considered like, well, it doesn't really matter. Nobody really watches TV that way anymore. It's just such a weird dichotomy right now. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
It just seems the business model is just, it's not what it was. You broadcast television, the viewers are going down every year. It seems the person that figured it out maybe is Byron Allen, which, he keeps the shows so cheap to do. And I love the fact that the current 11:30 shows employ so many people. I just don't know going forward if it's
a big machine.
Yeah. It's a lot of people. I am grateful to my friends that I have at Colbert that they were still at least given, I think they have 7 more months or something like that.
Yeah.
But it never occurred to me ever that you could be number one and for the metrics for it not to be, if that's true, that it really lost that much money.
You're in trouble if the number one show gets canceled. Yeah. If everything is happening for the reasons.
Yeah, I couldn't
stated.
Believe it. Hopefully those shows will live on in some form.
Yeah.
But I think Kimmel's going to re-up. If Kimmel leaves his show, that time slot, it's not like, I don't think ABC's going to have a replacement late night show.
I agree.
I think it's
done. Just be something else.
I think Kimmel realizes that's a huge responsibility. One, for the staff, and so many people on that show are either related to him or friends of friends. And it's like this family. I really like when I've gone over there and visit. Very warm over there.
He's warm.
Really nice.
He came and did Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, and he brought barbecue.
That was,
it was very chill.
Yeah, he would send sandwiches to people out of state and just, I hope he continues.
Yeah, me too. So, love Johnny Carson. Really great book.
Thank you.
And I love the way you start it. Who was Johnny Carson? Ask a dozen people and you get a dozen different answers. Trust me, I've asked everyone.
400 some people, pretty much.
Wow.
It was one of those things, though. It took me a while to really realize that, I don't know, I did no qualifications. I'm not a journalist, but for whatever reason, I feel like I was able to, when doing this podcast and talking to that many people, just as this light bulb moment that the media really got him wrong. And the books, I think some of the books just got who he was so wrong. Maybe it's because his friends, the people I talked to and his staff were so loyal that they didn't really open up to him before. But
yeah,
in this book, in my opinion, he is unrecognizable from pretty much all the other books that you'll read.
Was there a prior book that was sort of considered the most authoritative or anything?
I think that probably from a research standpoint, the best one probably was Lawrence Lemur's book. Mr. Lemur was very nice, and I talked to him for this book, and he helped me out a bunch. But to me, there are comparisons made with Bob Woodward's book Wired about Belushi, where there's no argument. Like, everything Mr. Woodward said about Belushi is true.
Yeah.
It's just, you talk to people that knew Belushi, And they loved him, and he was fun and completely different. And I feel with Mr. Lemur's book, did an amazing job. That research is impeccable. I'm not saying anything's not true. It's just from talking to the people that knew him and talking to the hundreds of people. The reason the book's called Love Johnny Carson is because so many people that would tell me, I love Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
This is what I got. And I just couldn't believe it. The people I talked to that really knew him, that spent time with him, he was the same Carson, almost the same Carson on air and off air. If he knew you and he was comfortable, it was a small group of people.
Yeah.
That was such a light bulb because the media made him out to be very cold and aloof.
Yeah.
I really did I met Joan Rivers a couple times.
Well, I was going to say that story alone carries so much weight.
I think it comes down to Miss Rivers wanting to be a good wife. Her husband, Edgar Rosenberg, in my opinion, I think a lot of people's minds just had made some bad decisions.
Because she was basically being groomed to be his successor to a certain degree.
Johnny had no decision making on who would be the successor. She was the permanent guest host. So I think it was 1982. Johnny wants a permanent guest host, selects Miss Rivers. Her earnings just shoot through the roof, and she's in Vegas. I think it was either Vegas or Atlantic City. She broke Frank Sinatra's record for how much money she was getting paid. I mean, it was Miss Rivers and Edgar. I think it was probably Edgar's idea, went to Fox, which was just starting, and that would have been, they went in, I think it was December of 85. And they were really interested in a late night show with Miss Rivers, and she signed to go against Johnny. And Barry Diller told me to my face, I told Joan, you owe it to Johnny after everything he's done to you to tell him that you signed this deal with Fox and that you're going to be competing against him. He's like, I'm friends with Carson. I play in a poker game. It's Steve Martin, Chevy Chase, Neil Simon. You need to tell him. And Edgar Rosenberg, who wanted to be a successful producer and wanted to produce this late night show, which he did, told Miss Rivers that there would be unforeseen circumstances if Carson knew about this. And they just were tight-lipped. Rivers' own friend said, Johnny is going to be so upset. You need to tell him. You know, she did the show up until like 2 weeks before she announced that she was going to Fox. She was guest hosting the show, and she really let it slip a couple times. Another reason she didn't tell Carson is because she knew, and this would have happened, that her guest hosting would have stopped. So basically, she sacrificed a relationship with Carson for guest hosting for, I guess, 2 more months.
Wow.
Johnny found out from the NBC head, Brandon Tartikoff, the night before the press conference. Johnny couldn't believe it because Miss Rivers' people were negotiating with Carson's people, because Carson owned The Tonight Show, to keep guest hosting the show. They were in negotiations for her to keep guest hosting The Tonight Show, where she had signed this deal with Fox months prior and had no intention of
That's bizarre.
And then Miss Rivers finally tried to call Carson, but he had already found out about it and was just so hurt that didn't take the phone call. And then Miss Rivers admits this as well, that she tried to take Johnny's producer, Peter LaSalle, who Miss Rivers was very good friends with, the families were friends with, to Fox with her. Every talent coordinator was offered double their salary. So she was trying to steal the staff.
So there's some poaching.
Johnny just could not believe somebody that he had set up and gave so much success to. He just thought that her actions were just unexcusable. I don't think Miss Rivers ever got over it. I really don't, that Johnny didn't forgive her. And Johnny was one of those people that he was such a sensitive guy that if somebody hurt him like that, they just didn't exist anymore.
Just erased from the photograph kind of thing.
Yeah, if she would have gone to him and said, I have this opportunity, he would have said, you have my blessing. But just like he did with Roseanne, he would have given her advice. He warned Roseanne for her not to sing the Star Spangled Banner. She was like a week before singing at the Padres game. He's like, it's the most difficult song. Are you sure you want to do this?
Wow.
And Roseanne did not listen to him. I mean, what Johnny would have told Miss Rivers was, your style works because it's every 5 weeks, but for every night, it's just not going to work to be doing the style show you do. I mean, she would just do fat jokes about Elizabeth Taylor and just rip apart famous people. So she had trouble getting guests.
Oh, yeah.
And then Barry Diller,
sense.
after, 9 months, 10 months, told Miss Rivers, I am firing your husband as producer. And she said, if you do that, then I quit. And Barry Diller fired her. She thought that he was bluffing. And then 2 months later, or whatever it was, tragically, Edgar Rosenberg took his own life. And Miss Rivers found out that she was in debt millions and millions of dollars.
Oh, my God.
So the Late Show started using guest hosts, including Arsenio Hall. So the show kept going for a while. And Miss Rivers, talk about being down and out and reinventing yourself. I mean, she was such a pioneer and so important to comedy. Just the fact that she was able to reinvent herself, and just as a business person with QVC and with E. And
we had a great interaction with her in New York. Amber, my wife, had just had like a dental procedure, so she was a little loopy. And we were introduced to Joan Rivers. Amber was like, "Oh, wow, Joan Rivers, my mom loves you." And then Joan Rivers goes, "Oh, thank God."
She was really nice and really funny, and I think she had good intentions.
It's a cautionary tale. I mean, it's like one of the make sure to treat your mentors the right way, like one of those stories. It's probably the first one that comes to mind.
He just didn't understand
It's
why.
tough. And then I have one more Johnny Carson question. You mentioned, like, I think it was in the context of your book tour, going to Nebraska.
Yeah.
That's so cool because Johnny Carson's from
really
Nebraska,
nice.
right?
That's right. I'm going to be going there. I've never been there.
How do you think Nebraska influenced, whether it's the Midwestern mentality or the groundedness or, you know, being able to relate to Middle America as much as the coast? How important do you think being from Nebraska is to Johnny Carson's
I think
story?
when he got there, and I thought it was Norfolk, but they call it Norfolk.
Okay.
When he got there, I think it was like first or second grade. He was born in Corning, Iowa, and then was in Avoca, Iowa, and then he gets to Norfolk. I think that he just always considered that, even when he was like one of the highest paid TV comedians out there, he was living in California. I still think that Nebraska stayed with him. And I think he was completely himself when he was out there. And I think he was Nebraskan. I don't think it ever went away. He was not riding in limousines like Ed McMahon. He did not have bodyguards. He did carry a registered concealed weapon, a gun for protection. Just because the FBI and so many police had to be involved because he had constant threats on his life. Mark David Chapman, who assassinated Lennon, had a short list of people. If it wasn't John Lennon, Johnny was on the list. So
wow.
Constant threats. People getting past NBC security with knives and guns. So the whole cold and aloof thing just came from self-preservation, that so many people were trying to get at him. When he started the show, he was doing an hour and 45-minute show, down to 90 minutes, and he was exhausted all the time.
That is insane.
Yeah, he'd protect his energy. He would get there like an hour or two before the taping, whereas Conan would be there all day. Johnny thought his energy would get used up if he was at work. So he would just slide into the show, protect his energy. It was hour 45, and then he was doing the weekends. NBC was sending him to like affiliates and luncheons and dinners on the weekend. So yeah, the first year he did, I think, 404 hours of late night, whereas now they do at the most 180, and they still complain at 180. Shandling said no one knows how exhausting this thing is.
Yeah, because Shandling came up, and like in multiple succession, Shandling's name was being thrown around, but he knew, and so he was like, you know what, I'm going to do a scripted version of this. I'm not going to do the real.
I think he made the right decision.
Yeah.
Chevy Chase, he guest hosted only one time in '86. Went back with Johnny a month or two later and said, "This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I've never done a monologue before. No one is ever going to be the next Johnny Carson." And then proceeds in 1993, I guess, to forget how hard it was. And
Chevy Chase show.
Yeah, so that was
speaking
tough.
of cautionary tales.
I do think the Nebraska thing, like Johnny gave Conan the advice, you have to be yourself out there. Yeah. That's the only way it can work.
You can't fake it. It's just too much screen time to fake it.
For somebody to succeed at the level Johnny did, he was himself out there. I know when people would go to a stage show in Las Vegas when he broke Judy Garland's record in Vegas, I mean, he was making so much money in Vegas. If somebody was from Nebraska and they sent a note back, "Can I meet you after the show?" He'd be like, "Yeah, come on back." He just longed for authenticity.
Yeah.
After he would tape The Tonight Show, he wouldn't be going out with the A-list movie stars to dinner. It was always Carl Sagan, Jim Fowler, who was an animal wildlife guy, and Paul Ehrlich, who wrote about population control. He loved hanging out with magicians that weren't famous, just curious.
Yeah.
Just a curious guy. And his rule was always, Peter LaSalle told me, Johnny's producer, number one most important thing was to make the guests look good. The first half hour was Johnny's monologue and the comedy bit. That was Johnny. And then it was all about making my guests look good.
Yeah.
Letting them get a laugh first. He had a skill set where I don't think any other late night host, where he was able to ask a question, listen, and then multitask what his next question would be and edit stuff in his head and do all these things at once. One of the people I had on the show, Elizabeth Ashley, an actress who went on Carson a lot, said Carson would cast you better than anybody. All you had to do was let him take over. And people just that were so terrified and nervous to be out there, it would just melt away. Routinely, people would tell me he had this power when you would shake his hand. One of the staff members said it was like shaking hands with a nuclear reactor. The other people told me they could feel his energy before the show. Like he'd be going past and they could just feel it because he was just giving out so much energy when he was hosting that show. it just made people come alive and just shine.
That's so interesting.
It was unbelievable what he was able to do for those 30 years and not have really any serious competition. Arsenio probably maybe was the biggest threat, but still it was different audiences. And the only other institution I know that really went that many years without any serious competition is Saturday Night Live. I mean, the last couple of years he was only doing this, hosting the show 3 nights a week when he did host. And it wasn't because he was lazy. He just did not have the energy anymore. And he didn't want the quality of the work to diminish.
Yeah, you got to make an adjustment.
Yeah, and then he leaves in May 92 was his last episode. And then for 2 solid years, people always will be like, yeah, and then he disappeared. I'm like, no, he had 2 more years up until May of 94, where he does Bob Hope 90th birthday, American Teacher Awards, gets the Kennedy Center honors, David Letterman cameo, gets the Presidential Medal of Freedom from George Herbert Walker Bush. He did a bunch of things, and The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And then May of 94, when he does the cameo on Letterman at CBS Television City when Dave is out here for a week, that was it. Yeah, he was one of those people who was able to step back and be like, I did the best work and just let it go. But again, the media tried to make him out to be J.D. Salinger, Greta Garbo, reckless, and nothing could be further. He did like his alone time on his yacht, but I mean, he's an introvert. So am I. I like my alone time, but
I mean, to try to cast somebody's retirement as being reclusive is kind of weird.
I think so. You know what? It's so funny. Like, I had a friend of mine, after Regis had left doing his show with Kelly Ripa, was like, what is Regis doing now? I'm like, the guy's 90. It's like this perception, I think, from some people that if you're in show business, that you can't walk away like Gene Hackman did when he was 80. And be like, I'm going to retire. And people are like, wait, what?
Yeah, I'm out. I'm walking away
done.
from the blackjack table.
I did Tenenbaums.
Here.
I'm done. I think he did a voiceover. He did the narration, I think, for a Marines documentary, and that was it. And he was in New Mexico and hopefully very happy. But there were certain people that just needed to be in front of an audience. Like Regis was one, and so was Rickles to be happy. Johnny was able to, I think, wisely, just like, I did the best work. I don't want the work to suffer.
I like hearing that. That feels sane.
I'm so happy Letterman is still around, because there was definitely people that knew him. Somebody told me that they thought that knew Dave very well, that after he left his CBS show, no one would ever see him again. But I think he's as funny now as he was then. And if you can still do the work and be funny, please keep going. And I'm really glad that Dave is still doing stuff.
Yeah. When is the Nebraska trip for you?
Nebraska is coming up on the 8th. I'm excited, and apparently the gentleman who owns the Johnny Carson's Boyhood Home is giving me a tour, so
awesome.
Looking forward to that. Yeah, just to be at a place that was so pivotal to a project that I've been working on for so long.
I bet some interesting realizations and emotions are going to come from that trip.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think so. I'm really looking forward to it. It's nice they asked me to come out, so we shall see. But this was fun, Will.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
And it's really great to meet you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. This was fun.
Thank you, Mark Malkoff. If you're a fan of biographies, love Johnny Carson as a keeper. Vulture recently named it as one of the best comedy books of 2025, and it is just overflowing with new information and insight. I also loved hearing about Mark's days as a young comedy fan. I was into a lot of the same stuff he was as a kid, but it never would have occurred to me to just drive to 30 Rock and stick around until you made a career out of it. Life in Comedy is recorded at Jet Road Studios. Please rate and review the show on places like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and follow us on Instagram. You can also follow Jet Road Studios on Instagram as well as YouTube, and our website is jetroadstudios.com. Thanks for listening.